Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of the last session of the course, and along the lines of what we learned for the last few sessions, which concerned spherules, vulcanization, filter bubble and digital divide, remediation and so on and so forth. We are going to learn about two new concepts today. One has got to do with digital divide, and number two, remediation. Yes, so along the lines of the digital tools that we were talking about, we are going to learn about two new concepts today. Number one is digital divide, of which we have already spoken when we are doing the session on the biases of communication. So, so we had kind of two sessions on biases of communication, and we had like kind of a longer session devoted to the idea of digital divide. So, we will talk briefly about digital divide, and also we will get to know about remediation. So, these are the two concepts which is along the lines of the analytical tools, so to say, that we were learning about in the last few sessions. So, we talked about spherules, we talked about vulcanization, we talked about digital divide, we talked about, of course, filter bubble. So, digital divide is in connection to filter bubble. So, we will talk about that and get to remediation. So, so, we are going to learn about these two concepts. Yeah, so, broadly speaking, digital divide refers to any kind of division or discrimination that happens with our digital practices in the digital ecology. So, Wikipedia broadly defines digital divide as, and I quote from Wikipedia here, any uneven distribution in the access to, use of or impact of information and communication technologies between any number of distinct groups. So, these groups may refer to demographic groups or even institutions, political groups or whatsoever. So, that is broadly speaking is the digital divide refers to as the uneven distribution. But for a very long time, digital divide was being understood from the very kind of a very Marxist perspective. So, people as in scholars of media studies would look into digital divide as an uneven distribution of resources, as in your access to the internet, for example, access to ICT as in information communication technology devices, like access to the computer, access to the network, access to the internet, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is pretty obvious, and this is generally speaking the very conventional understanding of digital divide. So, we will keep this aside for a while, and we will talk about certain nuanced understanding of digital divide, and like this is where I will take off and I will speak on remediation. So, I will talk about what like how digital divide also leads to kind of remediation. When I speak about remediation, I will show you a meme and I will explain how digital divide works hand in hand with remediation, and how remediation to a great extent fosters digital divide. And if you recall the session that we did on the biases of communication, a part of which was dedicated to the concept of filter bubble and Elie Pariser and so on and so forth. We talked a great deal about filter bubble when we discussed the biases of communication. So, digital divide one can also see as another face of filter bubble. If filter bubble concerns a bubble, a small sphericule where people just shut themselves off and live in their own digital habitat or digital ecology, completely shut off from contrary opinions or people and friends who share contrary opinion, who may have contrary opinions. If that is filter bubble, then digital divide, as you can see, like it is also an uneven relationship, if we may call it. So, what I am trying to push you to think is digital divide, although it is largely understood as uneven distribution of resources, could also be seen as uneven pattern of networking, uneven relationships, and so on and so forth. And of course, like the hierarchization of subjectivities, like who gets to, as I in the last session I talked about Mark Graham, and I talked about how Mark Graham talks about the sources of Wikipedia information, like who gets to code the information which is out there in the internet. And as I already mentioned this, like in his study, Mark Graham demonstrates that is the white English speaking male who happens to be most, like who accounts for the most of the contributors on Wikipedia. So, as you can realize, like this is an uneven distribution, like like no other people from across the globe gets to contribute the extent of information that the English speaking white male contributes to Wikipedia as a website. So, this is of course an uneven distribution in the way the ICT or the information technology functions in the sphere of digital ecology. So, in other words, like I am trying to push, as I said, I am trying to push you to think through this, not only just questions concerning resources. Digital divide could also mean how uneven subjectivities and uneven networks of relationships are fostered in the digital realm. So, you could probably, like taking I mean, as I said, like these are analytical tools which will help you better understand the reality and the sociology of new media or internet practices, so to say. Taking cues from the concept of digital divide, you could probably ask, like, who is the subject that connects, like not connects to the internet, connects with other people. Like Facebook, for example, is a platform where we network and connect with other people, organizations, networks, institutions. So, if you look into this pattern of connection, like who connects with who, which organizations connect with which organizations. So, what is the sociological implications of such networking? As if you now recall your concept of the filter bubble, like as I said, like what filter bubble does, it renders the digital practitioners to function in sphericals, in small bubbles. And what people do, as Eli Pariser and scholars of filter bubble would suggest, they only mix and they open themselves to people who share common opinions, and they shut themselves off to people who have contrary opinions. So, this is a networking pattern. So, we, as Eli Pariser suggests, that we make friends with certain people who are already disposed to sharing the ideas that I share. Like I'll give you a quick example here. Yeah, if you look into the Eli Pariser lecture, which the link of which was already shared, which is an YouTube lecture, Eli Pariser has this very interesting lecture. Eli Pariser has this very interesting illustration. He talks about people searching with, for example, Egypt on Google, the search engine, and what Google shows, it shows like travel to Egypt, tourism in Egypt kind of searches to some people, while it showed the Egyptian revolution, the Egyptian uprising, the Arab Spring, and so on and so forth to some other people. So, what struck Eli Pariser in formulating his idea of filter bubble was he was surprised at the fact that Google, in fact, and this is because of AI, artificial intelligence, and how bots program, and how bots program and record cookie histories and so on and so forth, and how they make sense of which information is relevant to who. So, what Eli Pariser suggests, that when we perform our internet searches, we do not necessarily see things that exist in the digital universe. We see things that the particular search engine wants us to see, and the particular search engine based on our browsing history determines is worth seeing. So in other words, it's not about our individual choice, like, because we do not know for that matter the entirety of things. So what we see on a particular search result page on Google, for example, this is not exhaustive. So this is a selective list that Google thinks that we should see, and Google compiles this for us in order based on what Google thinks is relevant to the particular user. Yeah, so this again, like this, as you can understand, if someone search, if there's a bunch of people who is searching Egypt on the Google search engine, and they have different results depending on the location, place, time, context, and their browsing history, Google shows them different results. So similarly on Facebook, so whatever feeds, whatever posts that show up on our Facebook page, on our home page, is not necessarily an exhaustive compilation of all the posts that have been posted by our networks and friends. So it's a set of posts like precisely selected by Facebook that Facebook wants us to see. So there's this index based again on artificial intelligence, algorithm, browsing history, and so on and so forth. And of course, based on this, based on AI, based on algorithms and artificial intelligence and things like that, Facebook determines which posts are worth appearing on our walls. So in other words, Eli Pariser calls this a gatekeeping mechanism. So these corporations, these platforms, Facebook, Google, or Twitter, or whatever platform you may invoke here, what they do, Eli Pariser says, is a kind of a gatekeeping mechanism. There's a gatekeeping mechanism in place. So they show, they edit and they scrutinize and edit things, and they selectively show us things that we get to see. So this, as you can understand, fosters a set of network, a set of relationships. So on Facebook, like, because there are certain posts that pop up on my wall, I'm disposed to making friends with certain people. So the way in which these friendships or networking happens on the digital realm is largely dependent on how we are disposed to finding insularity, or finding kind of a cocooning mechanism in finding recluse in similar ideas, people who share similar opinions, and so on. One could also like look into this using the lens of digital divide, because these relationships, as I'm trying to illustrate, is largely uneven. Like we are not equally open to all kind of opinions, all kind of people, or the posts that share contrary opinion to ours. So as I said, the gatekeeping mechanism which is in place, they do the shortlisting for us, and we are already by dint of such gatekeeping, we are only exposed to certain ideas, we are only exposed to a certain kind of network building. So this is also uneven in a sense. I mean, this is in which case you could use the tool of digital divide to understand what are these patterns of networking that we do on the digital realm. Like, who do we make friends with? Like, what are the demographic factors, for example, of the friends that you have on YouTube? What kind of political opinions that these people would share? Like, how different, how divergent or convergent they are from the kind of opinion that you share. So it's an uneven networking to begin with. So with these illustrations, what again I'm trying to show is like digital divide, as it is largely understood in terms of access to resources. I mean, the understanding of digital divide has gone beyond that. So, it can, like, we could probably use digital divide to think like who is the subject that connects, like as I said, individuals, organizations, schools, hospitals. So, what is this implications of network building? So, which characteristics or attributes are distinguished to describe the the divide? So, what are the demographic factors that you invoke in order? I mean, this concerns the resource part, but then I'll give you a few pointers here, and which goes beyond the resource thing. But like as of the resource is concerned, one could use demographic factors to account for the nature that distinguishes the kind of the pattern of networking in the digital space. So, is it income, is it education, age, gender, location? Mark Graham's work, for example, concerns geography and location, and also ethnicity to a great extent, like the information or the fact that white English speaking male codes most of the Wikipedia information is an example of how dominant ethnicity or dominant gender is privileged over the other. So, it's uneven, it's a nature, it's a kind of a privileged entity that renders people from certain ethnic group, certain gender group to be able to contribute more information than others. So, you can ask this kind of questions like what demographic factors do we need, like income, gender, age, geography, and so on and so forth, to understand the nature of unevenness, nature of hierarchical relationships, nature of privileges that exist in the digital ecology. Or you could ask, probably again, like this has got to do with material resources again, like how sophisticated is our technologies of networking. Say for example, there is a Wikipedia page, if you are curious you may pull it up. Wikipedia lists the countries according to the bandwidth speed, average bandwidth speed of the internet. Yeah, so Wikipedia has this list of countries like arranged in order according to the speed of internet, and what you see on screen on your left is the overall internet speed that these countries in the list enjoy. On your right, what you see is the mobile, like cellular speed, like data speed. Yeah, so if you see, there are certain countries which appear on the top, and if we just browse through, you like people who are curious could look into. There are 148 countries. So India ranks 90. India ranks 89 among 148 countries if we look into the overall internet speed. So one could probably ask here, like, I mean, digital divide is like as a concept is exceedingly important in, as I said, in understanding the nature of divide and hierarchical patterns that exist in the digital ecology. So you could probably be asking, why is it that some countries are on the top and some countries at the bottom? So what is the nature of unevenness that determines that some countries have like higher internet speed and some countries not so much? So one could also ask, and that's something that I would end the discussion with, to what extent does the subject extent that this pattern of privilege determine the subjectivity or the agency? Like as I said, I make friends with people who I think would be better as my friends, like the Google or Facebook does the gatekeeping for me. The way in which I choose my friends, the way in which I choose the pattern of networking on the internet has got to do with how I am predisposed to certain like-minded people, like-minded ideas, and so on and so forth. So to what extent does this privilege, or does this identities, our digital personas, if we may put it that way, like how, to what extent do our digital personas build a certain kind of reflexive or like elitist identities. Like if you, I'll give you a more concrete example. Like if you make a meme, you make it for a target audience. Like I think in the last session I was discussing the taking cues from Dana Boyd's article. We were discussing the question of the anxiety of staying relevant all the time. Like if you post something on social media, it is nearly impossible to post something which would be equally relevant to all my friends and all my networks at the same time. So, there is a context and time specificity of certain posts which make sense to certain people in a more meaningful or relevant way than other people. Like for example, if you are in Chennai and if you post event on a calendar in there's something happening in Chennai, so that would make sense, or that will have some relevance to your friends from Chennai and around. That wouldn't probably make sense to your friends from Kashmir. This is the anxiety of staying, we discussed this in the last session, the anxiety of staying relevant all the time. Yeah, so although we are kind of desperate to make sense and talk relevantly to the maximum number of people, our posts are targeted to certain kind of network, certain kind of friends, certain insider group. Like certain people are privy to certain information, like from the total number of friends that I have on Facebook, different people know me differently. I share different levels of intimacy with different friends. So, when I post things on the internet, I do not make equal sense or the same extent of relevance. I do not talk with the same extent of relevance to my entire network of friends. So, when we post things, not just on Facebook, of course, like our digital behavior, our digital ecology, if we make a, if we think it from a very broad perspective, like are targeted to certain networks, targeted to certain people. So, taking cues from here, you can use digital divide, the concept of digital divide, to think through what kind of posts make sense to what kind of people. So, what kind of networking does this foster, and what kind of identity, what kind of subjectivity does my digital behavior evoke. This is something I will end the session with, and I will give you a more concrete example to understand how our digital behavior or the artifacts that we float on digital platforms render possible the construction of a certain kind of identity. Like I see myself as a part of a larger fraternity, a larger group, and precisely because I, like it's a human instinct to stay in a filter bubble in sphericule, that I shut myself off, as I said, to contrary viewpoints, and I try to connect and I try to make these nodes of connection with the artifacts that I float on social media, with the posts that I share on social media. So, I'll explain this with a meme here, which will give us an idea of how our digital behavior fosters certain identities and certain subjectivities which are always intrinsically kind of privileged. So, you could again think through the question of privilege here. Yes, so what you see on screen is a meme which was widely circulated during the JNU protests, like a couple of years back, which made the national and possibly international news with the whole so this was a very widely circulated meme. So, the mower, as you can see, the lawn mower is shaped like a tank and is marked state machinery. And if you recall the nature of the protest that concerned nationalism, and then it concerned the bureaucratic takeover of the university following the Afzal Guru incident, and there was this whole rhetoric of nationalism versus anti-nationalism that emerged from the protests that, as you know, made national news. So, as you can see, the mower, the lawn mower is mowing the heads of what you can presume are the heads of dissenting students, and among the heads only 3 are clearly visible. Further, the protruding heads are labeled as UOH, JU and JNU, which are acronyms for University of Hyderabad, Jadavpur University and Jawaharlal Nehru University, where the protests unfolded. And as you know, these 3 are kind of premier Indian higher educational institutes, and anecdotally there were like similar protests that were happening parallelly, if not parallelly, like within a span of a year and a half. There were numerous other protests that were unfolding in these 3 universities. So, the meme is rather explicit in its symbolism. The meme clearly recalls the iconic Tiananmen Square image, like for those who are not familiar, that is a kind of an iconic image of us. Like there are several versions of the image that exist online. You can just pull it up on your Google image, and so famously referred to as the Tiananmen image. Tiananmen, it is a square in China, and there was Tiananmen protests and in the 1980s, like late in 1989 to be precise. So, the image as it was captured, it shows a solitary man standing fearlessly in front of a moving Patton tank. And he was just motionlessly standing. There are several versions of the image that exist though, but like you will see this particular man, like one single man standing beside a moving tank. So, that made again like it was a very iconic image that became indexical to the Tiananmen protest in 1989. So, digital media often what it does, it recycles contents from like already existing contents from other media. I spoke about it in the last session, like it is very easy with the ubiquity of the internet and the mobile phone that we take images, take pictures with our mobile phone, float it on Pinterest or Facebook. We can float it on multiple platforms across parallelly at the same time. Our friends can download it, write a line or 2 on the image, make it a meme, or even there are meme generators where there are generic images. We can tweak it and turn it into meme, float it into another platform. Or imagine, for example, if you are watching a cricket match on your TV, you could take a still, post it on your social media, or even generate a meme out of it. So, there is this convergence of platforms which we already discussed, and it is very easy with the ubiquity of the mobile phone and the internet to recycle contents that existed elsewhere in other platforms, other media. So, this as like the reason that I am bringing this up is like this image, like the image of the Tiananmen Square image was a photographic image which was later like recycled when the JNU protest meme circulated on Facebook. The iconic image was recycled and redone. So, yeah, so it makes reference, it kind of makes reference to the Tiananmen image, although it is not redoing it in a sense, but then during the digital media often recycles contents from other media, and in this case it is an original artwork by Paweł Kuczynski, He is a Polish artist who, like, the image, the original image was painted, like it was a digital image. So, it was digitally painted by this Polish artist, which is there on his website. Again, if you are interested, you may pull up his website like this. When people tried to make meme, like the protesters, the JNU protesters wanted to articulate their protest, their anxiety and their dissident spirit, if we may call it, they repurposed and they redid the Polish Paweł Kuczynski's image. So, Bottler, like J. Bottler and Richard Grusin, they call this remediation, like you remediate something, remediate. So, the image already exists. So, see the number of connections this image is making. So, on the one hand, it is making connection to the Tiananmen image, in the sense that 3 solitary heads, like University of Hyderabad, Jadavpur University and JNU, these are the 3 solitary heads. If you refer to the image, these are the 3 solitary heads which stand out in front of a moor. This makes reference to a solitary man standing before a tank. That is the first reference. The second reference is a direct repurposing or reformulation of the digital image. So, Bottler and Grusin would call this remediation. So, they are remediating something. So, likewise, the referentiality, like this is a series of reference, that is what I am saying, it is a series of references that the image is making. So, this is what I call referentiality. So, the referentiality that is there in the image, that is there in the meme, remediates certain registers of dissent and iconoclasm, attaching them to the student protests that were happening at that particular time at JNU. And meanwhile, the caption, if you see at the base of the image, the caption reads, and this is in Bengali, it reads কেউ কেউ জেগে আছে বলে কারো চোখে আজ ঘুম নেই, which in this is in Bangla. People who do not follow Bangla, this roughly translates as because some are awake or awakened, some cannot rest in peace. So, of course, the hint being just because these 3 universities, or by extension the students from 3 universities are awake or have been awakened, that is because that is why the state machinery, which has been symbolically represented as the lawnmower, cannot sleep in peace. So, this is illustrative of a curious kind of a triangulation of radicalism, dissent and iconoclasm. Yeah, so this has larger ramifications on how people who made this meme or floated this meme at the time of JNU protests would envisage a kind of a privileged identity for them. So, in other words, the clear hint being these 3 institutions are elite, and by extension the students from 3 universities are better off than students elsewhere, number 1. And number 2, like the kind of privileging of the Bengali identity, for example. So, once this meme is floated online, the acronyms for the 3 universities appear in English. Otherwise, Rashtra Jantro, the state machinery, is in Bengali. The yellow thing at the yellow baseline at the bottom of the image also appears in Bengali. So, in other words, this linguistic register also privileges a kind of a linguistic identity. Yeah, so one could also read this through the lens of digital divide. So, it's a divide among a certain demographic or certain linguistic identities that are in place here. So, of course, people who follow Bengali would be able to make better sense of the meme, would be able to understand the meme relevantly than than people who do not speak Bengali, inasmuch as people from the 3 universities in particular, Hyderabad, Jadavpur and JNU, people from 3 universities in particular would relate to this meme in a way that people from outside these 3 universities would not be able to. So, what I am trying to illustrate here is through this innocuous meme, there is a kind of a privileging of a certain identity or a couple of identities, the linguistic and the 3 university identity, if we may put it that way. Like these are the 2 identities which are being privileged when the meme is floated on the internet. So, like one exercise you could probably do is to like find out artifacts, memes, posts, and kind of try to figure out what kind of identities do they privilege. And if you go back to the session that we did on biases of communication, this directly has resonance to the kind of stuff that we discussed while we discussed biases of communication. If you recall, the biases of communication precisely what it does is to what it prompts us to think about is how certain technology or communication artifacts encourages, privileges, endorses certain things and discourages certain other things. So, this is kind of a bias, if you would like to call it, and this is a direct implication of the digital divide.